News reporting that they have found Jamal Khashoggi's body parts buried in the garden. This is Sky News, have you? In the garden of the General Consulate's residence, which is about 100 yards from the Saudi consulate. So they buried the body, allegedly, according to Sky News, in the backyard, in the garden, like a compost. I know it's gross, but this thing is getting worse by the day. It really is. I mean, I don't know. How is MBS going to spin this now? I think he's running out of yarn. Joining us now, boy, we got a lot to talk about. I'm so excited to have him on. The former United States ambassador to Qatar, former United States Ambassador Patrick Theros. Mr. Ambassador, it is always an honor to have you on our show, sir. Thanks for being with us.
Mine as well, John. It is a great pleasure. Sad day. I mean, terribly sad day. This.
Explain how this could be sanctioned by allegedly Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who's not even taken power. I mean, there's other reports now, sir, that he was directing basically traffic, if you will, to put it in layman's terms, via Skype on what was going down with Jamal Khashoggi, who's a human being that went to the consulate to get paperwork to show that he was divorced in Saudi Arabia so that he could get married to his Turkish fiancée. How did this happen?
I have absolutely no idea how anybody could be that incompetent in today's world, other than the possibility that there's just no adult supervision. This seems to me it's sort of a horrid version. You and I are old enough to remember Jimmy Breslin's book, The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight?
Yes.
Yeah, this is sort of a horrid version of that.
So
it is just unbelievable.
And the other thing is, Mohammed bin Salman spent all this money and effort in the United States lobbying, as you know, and he did the tour and he went around. He was in Texas and California and other parts of the country. He wore a business suit. He's trying to get, he's investing money and he's trying to present himself as a new, young, visionary leader. And instead we get this.
Yeah, again, I'm sort of speechless. I'm speechless at their brutality. I'm speechless at their incompetence. I mean, if you're going to kill somebody, you shouldn't be going around having planned assassinations of journalists, certainly. But if you're going to do it in a way that one has a good chance of avoiding detection, and there's so many people in this that it would have certainly come out, and two, that when it comes out, you haven't horrified everybody who hears about it.
Mr. Ambassador, how does this affect U.S.-Saudi relations?
That's a question you have to direct to the White House at this moment. I personally believe that Mohammed bin Salman has committed one perhaps unpardonable sin. He has now basically dragged the family of the president into this.
Mm-hmm.
Until now, this was in any other country, this would have been between countries. Mm-hmm. But now he has tarnished the reputation of the president's family. Mm-hmm. Simply guilt by association. And I personally believe the time has come to deliver a very strong message and not a slap on the wrist. This is the kind of message where the Saudis have to basically learn that what they are doing harms not only their reputation, harms their own country, it also harms the interests of the United States of America. I would start very much by making it clear to the Saudis that the Yemen war is over. They have to wrap it up.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I would certainly try and take whatever action we could against the people directly involved, all the way up to the let's be in the real world. We're not going to take personal action against Mohammed bin Salman, I believe, but certainly enough of the people in his inner circle that that it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, I mean, the commentary that they buy so much from us that we need them badly is not a good narrative. The real narrative is the Saudis need us much more than we need them.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a... what's the word I'm looking for? It's not a one-way street. And the Saudi dependence on the United States is really quite considerable. They can't go to somebody else to buy weapons because, I mean, they can, but it means that if they break with us, their own military comes to a screeching halt within days, because we provide all the spare parts, we provide American companies and American technicians, provide most of the maintenance supervision and the maintenance skills. As I say, I don't believe the Saudi military could stay functional beyond a few weeks, maybe a month or two, without direct American support. So we have the upper hand. There's no doubt in my mind we have the upper hand. It also looks like the Europeans are going to stop selling military equipment to the Saudis. So that leaves them with the Russians as the only other viable place to go. And I'll tell you, I wouldn't want to be a country like Saudi Arabia dependent on the Russians for my defense. Mm-hmm. And it would take 5 years to basically stand down the American equipment and buy Russian equipment. Now, Mohammed bin Salman's reaction to a very simple tweet, minor insult from the Canadian foreign minister, very minor,
mm-hmm.
to break relations and everything like that, indicates we may not have a totally rational actor on that side.
Mm-hmm.
So his other great problem, of course, is that if he has done so much damage to the interests of the ruling family, he has jailed so many of them, shaken them down for their wealth and so forth. Some of which was justified, made him popular. But at the same time, he has made so many enemies domestically that if he lost power and was sort of put out on the street, he would be a dead man.
So you mentioned the word, Mr. Ambassador, incompetent. And you're the first one that said that, and I've got it written down because I think that really sums this up. A lot of the things that MBS has gotten involved in have not been successful, whether it be the way he's conducting the Yemeni civil war, which I think even supporters of that would say has been a disaster on every possible level. The blockade he did with Egypt, Bahrain, and the Emirates against Qatar has been a total colossal failure. It's almost a comedy show because the country of Qatar, the state of Qatar, is much better off economically and otherwise than they were before the blockade. And all it meant is that the Saudis aren't getting any of their business. I mean, it was really a complete catastrophe. I mean, if you went to Harvard, Mr. Ambassador, and taught a business class on international relations, how to do a blockade and have it blow up in your face, that would be your class. I mean, it's a disaster. So everything the guy gets involved in blows up. At what point does the father say, maybe he's just not equipped?
Well, I think that's truth. The problem is that the father may not be in a situation where he can actually call the shots, though he did call the shots when we moved the embassy to Jerusalem, and this was too much for the father, and he intervened. But that may have been an issue of such religious importance to the father that he was no longer prepared, that he could actually stand up to his son on that. But yet, the father right now, I mean, I agree, if this was a sensible world, the thing to do would be for the father to step in and remove his son from power. But the father must also be conscious of the fact that so many people now hate his son that he would be exposing him to retaliation, personal retaliation. And like I said, he could very well be a dead man if he left power.
Mm-hmm.
So that's got to be a complicating factor in the father's calculations.
Mr. Ambassador, how is this going to affect the balance of power in the Middle East, especially as it results to the Iranians?
The Iranians must be absolutely speechless at their good luck on this one.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine what the Iranians are going to let this one play out personally, further undermining the position of Saudi Arabia. Their ability, the Iranian position now of being able to say, you shouldn't have done away with the nuclear agreement, the JCPOA. What are you doing? Favoring somebody who's much worse than anything we've done?
Mm-hmm.
That's an arguable question, but right now, the Saudis have made the headlines, not them. They've made all the negative headlines. So for them, it's really a question of sitting it out. I think they can. They should be able to play the propaganda part of the war with of the Yemen war really well, and the amount of any residual support there might have been for the Saudis in the Yemen war is just going to be go away. The other big winner on this are the Turks.
Mm-hmm.
Erdogan is now in a position of being able to say, he's competing with the Saudis for what's the word I'm looking for influence and mastery of that part of the world, and they are not going to be in a position to stand up to him.
Mm-hmm.
So, all in all, it is a lose-lose for the Saudis all around, and it's unless we act really forcefully, and it's a lose-lose for us as well. We do need to put the Saudis in their place to make sure the Saudis understand who they really are. They are not the country that calls the shots for the United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
Either we're calling the shots or no one's calling the shots, but they're not the ones calling it for us. And so I feel very strongly that we need to stand up and say this is not this is simply intolerable conduct. It affects our interests. It certainly tarnishes the president's brand.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how you slice it, they have now embarrassed him and his family.
Mm-hmm.
And they've done it big time.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you get out of this? The way you get out of this is by making it very clear. Making it very clear that this is not an acceptable course of action.
Mr. Ambassador, how does this episode, this catastrophe for MBS, relate this now back to the other states in the Gulf? How does it affect Qatar's position and the blockade and the position that the administration has taken on that? Will there be any change in that? Will they look at it differently, being that the biggest military base that we have is there right by Doha? How will that might change, if at all?
I don't think it'll have much of a change. It'll make the Qataris a little bit more welcome here in Washington. But by and large, we've now gotten to the point where the Qataris are comfortable in a relationship with us.
Mm-hmm.
They're having a biannual strategic dialogue with us. They continue to buy large quantities of military equipment. The base functions very well. If anything, the base has become more important.
Right.
So, from the Qatari point of view, I think this is, it's a net plus, but they're already in a good place. The country that I think is going to be most affected by this among the other Gulf states will be the UAE, because Mohammed bin Salman is seen as the protege of the Crown Prince of the UAE, Mohammed bin Zayed, who's older and smarter and far more capable, and who has been able to use Mohammed bin Salman to carry much of the UAE's agenda. I mean, for example, it's pretty clear to everybody in the region that the campaign against Qatar was dreamed up by the UAE for the UAE's own reasons, and Mohammed bin Salman was persuaded to go along. And also the UAE has very much taken the lead. UAE is pursuing a separate policy from Saudi Arabia in Yemen. The UAE seems to be trying to hive off the southern part of Yemen, make it an independent country dependent on the UAE.
Right.
And the UAE has been using Saudi power to pressure the Omanis into falling in line with them. So far unsuccessfully, but they needed the Saudis to be able to do that. Well, all of a sudden, Saudi Arabia is going to be rather toxic for the Emirates as well. So a large part of what they have been doing, their own policies in the region, have been based upon the fact that they've been able, because of the personal relationship between the two crown princes, they've been able to get the Saudis to back them on virtually everything. And that now becomes a much more difficult story to sell in the region.
So, Mr. Ambassador, what you're saying is the Emiratis might want to distance themselves from Mohammed bin Salman a little bit instead of...
I think, at least in the public perception, they're really going to have to do that.
Right. All right, I've only got a couple more minutes, Mr. Ambassador. I want to get your take on Nikki Haley's resignation. I know the president says he's interviewing 5 people. You're in that world. You're former ambassador to the state of Qatar, now president of the U.S. Qatar Business Council. What did you think of the timing of Ambassador Haley's resignation, and who do you see as a viable replacement?
The timing, I think, has 2 parts to it. She didn't want to make it look like she was bolting at the end of the first half of the term. She needed to give the president enough time. She's going to stay in the job till the end of the year, which gives the president enough time. So I think she's got personal reasons for leaving. She has been in politics for so long. There have been newspaper stories that her personal family finances are not in really great shape. And I'll tell you, we don't pay our ambassadors very well. I mean, I'm prejudiced. I used to be one myself.
Right.
But we really don't pay our ambassadors very well. And living in New York, even though there's extras, it doesn't come anywhere near covering the cost of living and being the ambassador in New York and all the things you have to do.
Right.
It's a huge burden. We've got this problem in a number of other major countries around the world, like London and so forth. So if you asked me, I think it was simply she didn't realize being governor of a state is one thing. You know, she's a good person. She's an honest person. So I don't think she was taking advantage of her official position. But if you're in New York on the salary the State Department pays the ambassador, even the fact that you're tossing in the House and a few other things really doesn't cover it. So I think for her, there may have been a personal economic necessity to step aside for a little bit. She would also be a great asset for the Republican Party in a couple of years' time. She's smart. She can take middle positions. She's very articulate. She looks sassy, a little bit sassy and brassy, but that's okay. That works in today's politics as well. And, of course, she's now a woman in a minority, which is something that the Republican Party really desperately needs for its future. So I think she has a long-term future. She's young. So when you're at 2024, maybe, she's somebody around. I don't know if she wants to run for president, but she is going to be a person who can really get a lot of people who today wouldn't vote Republican.
Replacement.
Yeah.
Who will be her replacement?
A replacement? I have no idea. I've been looking at a little bit at the names. It really boils down to whether or not John Bolton has a big voice in this election. John Bolton, for whatever his good qualities are, is very much a firebomb thrower. And he's going to be trying to persuade the president to come up with someone like that, which I think was a mistake when he was our ambassador at the United Nations. He basically lost his ability to control, to to control that body, because a lot of the way the UN functions and a lot of the stuff that we get done, we actually get a lot more done than you would think from newspaper accounts. Mm-hmm. But most of that comes because if you've got a smart ambassador who reaches out to people and makes a lot of friends, the UN is a place for a guy who knows how to grant a lot of small favors. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the small countries who vote in the UN really need those small favors. So if the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations knows how to play these people well, it's a transactional game, but I will make sure the city of New York doesn't really enforce all the parking tickets you guys got. I can get your vote in a couple of things. And this is the way the UN operates under the fancy stuff at the top, under the big news. So what we need is a schmoozer. This is a perfect place. If there's any Southern politicians there, this is the perfect place for a Southern politician. These guys are real experts at schmoozing. So that's where I would put my cards. But whether or not they do so, I can't tell, because it depends on who's got the president's ear on this one. Remember, this is the most important ambassadorial position. The ambassador to the United Nations is the only American ambassador who sits regularly in cabinet meetings and has instant access to the president. So it's a very, very important position. You need to balance this out carefully as to who you put in that position. That's the qualifications. I don't know what the inner workings are right now inside the White House to decide who's going to be the job or not.
Well, we heard Rick Grinnell from Germany has interviewed, but we've also heard that the president prefers a woman to take the place of Nikki Haley. So those are in conflict. So no one knows. We do know that he's interviewed 5 people, but sounds like he's going to make a very deliberate decision. But it's very interesting what you say, and certainly the profile that you outlined doesn't exactly fit National Security Director John Bolton.
No,
it doesn't exactly. He's not the schmoozing type. I can say that. Having had him on my shows many times, I wouldn't say he would fit that description. Mr. Ambassador, it's always an honor to have you on. I enjoy our conversations, and whenever you're on.
Thank you so much. I do appreciate it as well.